34 of the House Commons Standing Committee on Finance. Pursuant to the committee's motion adopted on Friday, February 5th, 2021, the committee is meeting to study all aspects of COVID-19 spending and programs. Today's meeting is taking place in the hybrid format pursuant to the House Order January 25th, and therefore members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom applications. The proceedings will be made available via the House Commons website. Before I turn to witnesses, I believe Mr. Kelly had a point he wanted to make or a motion. I'm not sure. Pat, the floor is yours, and then we'll go to witnesses.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chair. And I just comment first, and I do have a motion to put on notice, but I was disappointed in the last minute cancellation of one of our first panel witnesses, Generation Squeeze, and I don't know if it was a sudden, unavoidable time conflict on their side, or if they had other reasons to not to decide at the last moment to not appear. But further to that, I now put this on notice, and the motion is as follows: that the committee hold one 3-hour meeting consisting of 2 1.5-hour panels, including Andrew Cowan and Stefan Jones of the CMHC in one panel, and Eric Swanson of Generation Squeeze, and Charlie Urselli of Watershed Partners in the second panel, to testify about the study entitled Wealth and the Problem of Housing Inequity Across Generations in Canada, and that opening statements for the meeting be limited to 5 minutes per panel.
Mr. Chair, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, that's notice a motion, then Mr. Kelly, and we can pull it off the table at any point in time, send it to the clerk, and it'll get translated and sent to all members.
Okay. I think that we have it translated. It will be with the clerk momentarily if it's not already there.
Okay, good.
Mr. Chair, point of information.
Yes.
Do we have, is this first session, this first panel, a 1-hour session, or is it an hour and a half session with
It'll
our
be an hour, about an hour and 10 minutes. We want to start the second panel at 5 o'clock.
Thank you very much.
An hour and 12 minutes. Okay. On Generation Squeeze, I understand they were in, they were out, they were in, they were out. We can ask the clerk to give a presentation, the reasons why, if he wants. Was there any reason given, Mr. Clerk?
The email didn't give a specific reason, but the witness did say that he would like to wait until the budget came out to have more content for his presentation. Okay,
all right, that's fine. There's not much we can do with that. All right, we'll start with the witnesses, and we'll start with Air Passenger Rights. Dr. Lucas, who's president, if you could hold it to about 5 minutes, and then we can go from there. Your floor is yours. You're muted too now, Dr. Lucas.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, honorable members, thank you for the privilege to be here today. Air Passenger Rights is Canada's independent nonprofit organization of volunteers devoted to empowering travelers. We take no government or business funding, and we have no business interest in the travel industry. We speak for passengers, whom we help daily in their struggle to enforce their rights. We recognize that the aviation sector is important not only to passengers, but also to aviation workers, who have also experienced considerable hardship over the past year. The pandemic brought to the forefront systemic issues that have plagued the aviation sector for nearly a decade. Airlines not respecting and the government not enforcing passenger rights. The refund controversy exemplifies these anomalies. It is a cornerstone of every transaction that if the consumer does not receive the goods or services they paid for in advance, the vendor must refund all monies paid. Air travel is no different. Passengers have a right to a refund for flights canceled by an airline, even if the reason is outside the carrier's control. In 2013, this was coined a fundamental right by the federal regulator. Yet, since March 2020, we have witnessed an unprecedented assault on passengers' private property and the collapse of consumer protection in Canada. Airlines whose revenues were decimated by the pandemic have helped themselves to passengers' money and pocketed airfares paid in advance without providing any services in return. For more than a year now, the government has taken no enforcement action against airlines that violated passengers' fundamental right to a refund for flights the airlines canceled. Instead, the government turned passengers' legal right to a refund into a bargaining chip in bailout negotiations. This was wrong. First, in a democracy, the laws must be enforced against citizens and corporations alike. Otherwise, we risk creating a two-tiered society where, as George Orwell put it, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Second, the failure to force airlines to promptly refund passengers has undermined consumer confidence and goodwill, which is a lifeblood of the entire travel industry. The Air Canada bailout suffers from the same flaws. It lacks any enforcement mechanism to ensure that passengers are indeed refunded. Instead of Air Canada's shareholders who previously reaped the profits, it is taxpayers who are footing the bill for refunds. The bulk of the bailout is in the form of unsecured loans. This means that no assets could be seized if Air Canada is unable to repay the loan. Unsecured loans tend to become grants. Taxpayers assume only a token 6% equity stake in Air Canada. For comparison, Germany took a 20% stake in Lufthansa. In addition, the sweetheart deal with Air Canada skews the market and undermines fair competition. This is nothing to say about Sunwing, WestJet, Porter, and other airlines whose passengers are also waiting for refunds. The Air Canada bailout is not only a bad deal, it also overlooks that it is not possible to cure the aviation sector's chronic illness by throwing billions of dollars at the current symptoms. Air Canada's new refund policy is an example in point. On April 13, within hours after the bailout was announced, Air Canada added to its terms and conditions an exception to its obligation to refund passengers for canceled flights. The purpose of the exception is to legitimize refusing to refund airfares in the event of a new wave or a new pandemic. It is unclear whether Deputy Prime Minister Freeland and Transport Minister Alghabra were aware of Air Canada's plan to add this exception and whether they were misled. Either way, Canadian taxpayers were shortchanged. They paid billions of dollars, and the systemic issues of lack of consumer protection have just gotten worse. Addressing the systemic issues is vital interest of passengers, aviation workers, travel agents, and the entire travel industry. Consumers will pay for services in advance only if they have confidence that they will receive the services they paid for, or if the services are not provided, a full refund of their hard-earned money. If Canada provides no such assurances, consumers will take their business elsewhere to airlines based in a jurisdiction that do offer such guarantees like the US or the EU. Canada, therefore, needs a declaratory legislation, as Bill C-249, to protect passengers' rights to a refund and to restore consumer confidence. In the absence of such legislation, no amount of taxpayers' money will save our travel industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lucas. You're under 5 minutes. Then turning to Colleen Cameron, Chair of the Board of Directors, Antigonish Affordable Housing Society. Ms. Cameron.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this invitation to speak to this committee. I am very privileged to be able to do that. Just to tell you who we are, the Antigonish Affordable Housing Society has been in existence since 1993 as a nonprofit organization, and we received our charitable status in 2014. Since then, we've been working very hard. We opened up 4 units in 2017. We had to do it in 2 phases because we couldn't secure the finances for the whole thing. And then the following year, we opened up another 10 units. So we have 14 units of affordable housing, high quality, energy efficient housing, and 4 of those are barrier-free units. Since then, we've been working to secure financing for the second complex we're building, which is 12 units directly across the street from elementary and junior schools, very good location. Again, we've been struggling to get the financing for that. We had planned on 15 units. We're going for 12, and we've gotten started and hope to sign off finally in the next week or so. But we're started and hope to have by the end of the year to have these units open. This is very much needed in Antigonish, a small university town with very high rents. So it does provide a much needed avenue for people to access affordable housing. Our vision is to be environmentally, socially, and financially sustainable, providing community supported affordable housing to the residents of the Antigonish town and county. And we are to develop and research new opportunities for affordable housing. So our vision and mission are based on our values of respect and dignity for all people, and understanding that access to good quality, affordable housing is a basic human right. So that's who we are and what we are doing. The effect of COVID-19 had quite a significant effect on us, the organization, as well as on the tenants who live in our units. For the tenants themselves, stress was a major issue, and I think that's been known all across the country, what COVID has done. It increased stress for many people. And a couple of our tenants actually had mental illness crises during that time. Fortunately, because we put such a focus on our social sustainability, we have in place, in our unique model, a community navigator who's there to support the tenants in accessing the resources and supports they can in the community. So we were well positioned when COVID hit to be able to support the tenants in that way. But I must say, we very much appreciated the support that we received through the Emergency Community Support Fund. And with that fund that we received, that was distributed by the United Way in Pictou County, we received $2,000, and we were able to provide tenants with masks and hand sanitizers, bus passes. And just for your information, some of the masks that we got were purchased from a new incomer Syrian refugee who has set up a new tailoring business. So that funding supported a new local business. And the bus passes that are very much needed are also supporting the Antigonish Community Transit. So that money, small amount, was well used and also put much needed cash into the local community. As an organization, our fiscal year ends at the end of March. We experienced this, in 2020, a $20,000 decrease in our revenue from donations and fundraising as a direct result of COVID. So we were actually very pleased and had access to, we received the Canadian Emergency Benefit Account, the CEBS loan of $40,000. And this was very helpful in covering some of our operating costs for that fiscal year, which just ended, and will continue to assist us in our operating costs for this fiscal year. In December, we had applied for increased funding to the amount of $20,000. We still haven't received that yet because it seems like our financial institution is having trouble obtaining these funds. It seems supposedly it's on the credit union end and not the government end, but so we're hoping to be able to access that soon. And again, in May 2020, we applied for the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, and this has been very useful in our program to help addressing some of the effects of the drop in revenue. So overall, these programs have been beneficial for us. As a charitable nonprofit community organization, we depend on fundraising and charitable donations to cover some of our operating expenses. And most importantly, the role of the community navigator, which is very important in our mind for sustainable affordable housing. Having our navigator in place before COVID hit put us in good position to assist the tenants during COVID when they were experiencing high stress levels. So accessing these funds was not a big challenge, and which was a very nice, pleasant surprise for us, because in our society are living in precarious positions, which was exacerbated by the pandemic. We have an increased number of calls desperately looking for affordable housing. So that COVID, it really exposed the financial and social gaps in our society, which really cannot be ignored anymore. So as we think about preparing for any future pandemics, like COVID or something else, we really need to build a resilient community. So as the emergency programs help mitigate some of these negative effects of COVID, I would suggest now the government programs need to be geared towards building resilient communities for the next emergency pandemics that are going to be hitting us. To build resilient communities, you have to have healthy people. And healthy, I mean mentally, physically, and socially healthy. They are more resilient to shocks and stresses and contribute to building resilient communities. Addressing the social determinants of health through an equity lens is a requirement for people and communities to be healthy. Ensuring everyone has access to quality, accessible, affordable housing is also part of a resilient community. And I would suggest that there needs to be a re-examination of the National Housing Strategy, which we are pleased to have, but improving access to the programs and ensuring organizations like ourselves have access to that. We've been working on this for 18 months now, and it requires a huge amount of time, a huge amount of skill. If I think of all of the people that put in time and expertise from our side and from the other side, that was a lot of money that would have been spent on that.
I wonder, Colleen, can we wrap it up
Yep.
fairly quickly? We're on a little
Well,
over.
the last sentence I have is to suggest ensure everyone has access to a livable income. That would make the greatest difference in building a resilient community. And on that note, I will end by thanking you for this opportunity to contribute to this study on COVID expenses and programs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. The lineup for questions, and we'll go with a regular 6-minute round, will be first Mr. Falk, then Mr. Fraser, Mr. St. Marie, and Mr. Massey. While Ted is getting off, getting his office mute there, I just would say this, Colleen, I've never heard tell of a community navigator before. That's an interesting concept. I think we could use that in a few places. Ted, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your patience with me. I'm scheduled to make a speech in the House, and I was just resolving that conflict, so thank you very much. Thank you to both our witnesses, Ms. Cameron and also Mr. Lukacs. I'm going to be directing most of my questions to Mr. Lukacs. Thank you for your presentation. I think I've had the privilege of listening to you once before on what you do for passengers' rights, and it's always very interesting and informative. So You talked about the bailout that was given to Air Canada just recently, and it's interesting that it's just been reported recently that this new language that was added to its terms and conditions, they gave themselves the legal right to refuse future refunds to passengers, and I think you touch on that. And this comes exactly on the heels of the federal government providing the $6 billion bailout. And you've indicated a little bit your reaction there. Why do you think they missed that in their negotiations?
That's a very troubling question. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Fogg. And the legal validity of that contractual provision, of course, would have to be determined by a judge. We have some doubts, serious doubts, whether any vendor, any business can contract out the obligation to refund its customers in the event that the services are not delivered, even if it is a war or a pandemic or the sky is falling. Doesn't matter. There's a fundamental right for all consumers in all countries to get back the money when you don't get the goods or services you paid for. But setting that aside, the short answer is that Air Canada is doing this because they can, because the government is not taking action, not taking enforcement steps against airlines that disregard passengers' rights. With respect to Air Canada, a Canadian Transportation Agency could disallow the tariff provision tomorrow. They wouldn't even need a complaint from us. They can simply look at it and say, this is an unreasonable term and condition, especially since Air Canada has gone public and had made broad public statements to the contrary. Air Canada assured the public through its press releases that from now on, for tickets that are purchased onwards, they would refund passengers if a flight is canceled, regardless of the reasons. So Air Canada is talking on both sides of its mouth. And we haven't seen yet any enforcement action about that either.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question or response to the question. You also talked about the potential unfairness of providing a bailout for one airline while leaving others trailing in the distance. You mentioned WestJet and Sunwing, Air Transat, Porter, airlines like that. Recently, the federal government also gave the provinces money to distribute to Northern and Indigenous service providers in the airline industry. My province of Manitoba received $12 million from the federal government to distribute to scheduled airline service providers to the North and to Indigenous communities. The problem is that we've got airline operators like Wings over Kissimmee that service the exact same communities as the scheduled service carriers do, often competing for the same businesses that got zero support. And in fact, in Manitoba, two airlines in particular, Comair and Perimeter Air, received $9 million of the $12 million, whereas Kissimmee, who is about a third of the size of Perimeter, received absolutely nothing. Can you, and I know you're as concerned for the employees and operators of small airlines as you are for passengers. Can you comment on that situation?
We are not familiar sufficiently with the exact details of those specific carriers. However, generally, Canada needs a competitive airline sector. We would like to ensure that it is not a monopoly or a duopoly on any route, but there are a number of airlines that all compete for consumers' money and that the competition is on a level playground.
Okay, thank you for that. And you've also had an opportunity to look at the Air Canada deal a little more closely. We've talked about the fact that there's no enforcement mechanism to ensure that the passengers are getting their refunds. And then we've also just talked about how Air Canada revised its policy with saying in future it may not refund money to its passengers. Is there any other aspects of the agreement that you see? Can you break it down a little further of elements of the deal that concern you?
The primary concern about a deal from a taxpayer's perspective, which I believe the interest for this committee, is that taxpayers end up funding the refunds for passengers instead of Air Canada shareholders who reaped the profits. So it was a pleasure to listen to the other witness today about how much even a few tens of thousands of dollars can buy and how much difference it can make in the lives of people who direly need assistance. And instead of the money going to those people, a lot of taxpayers' money has been sent to a corporation, a for-profit corporation with private owners that has misappropriated passengers' money, and now the taxpayers are making up for the shortfall. That raises significant concerns of transparency and of accountability. Normally, there should have been accountability for the corporation, for the shareholders, and the senior executives who were involved in misappropriating passengers' money.
You
Okay,
got
very
another
good.
minute, Ted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. When you look at the airline industry in general, it's obvious that it needs some kind of support. And the support that was provided recently, I mean, it's not perfect, but it is support. Are there any other suggestions that you could make to this committee how support going forward could be better tooled or better structured that might meet the needs of the airline industry while also satisfying fairness to the taxpayer and passengers?
First of all, I'm not sure if Air Canada was that much in need of financial support as they claim. There were perhaps other airlines that were, but Air Canada went into this crisis, into this pandemic with a very good, strong financial position. In terms of support, money should go primarily to restructuring, for improving service, for making services better technology, for expenses that make the industry as a whole more competitive and not just padding the executives' pockets or the corporation's coffers. Also, money spent on preserving the skills of aviation workers and ensuring that they keep up with their training and their skills is definitely a good public money investment, because while the corporations, the shareholders are dispensable, the aviation workers are not. They are a national asset.
And in addition to that, they've been taking full advantage of the 75% wage subsidy as a company.
Okay, thank
you, Mr. Chair.
thank you all. Turning then to Mr. Fraser, followed by Mr. St. Marie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to both of our witnesses. I'll focus my questions on the issue of housing in small communities. And Ms. Cameron, it's good to see you here. Thank you so much for joining us today and for your testimony. One of the reasons I'm particularly intrigued by your testimony, Colleen, is that we obviously have put forward a lot of funding toward housing through the National Housing Strategy. It works fairly well for really big operators who have full-time paid staff. I've obviously had the benefit of working to assist on some of the projects you mentioned, and I fully appreciate the lengthy period of frustration that you're going through as you work towards finalizing support for the next build. I'm curious if you have advice for the government on how we can improve access to the National Housing Strategy funding opportunities for small communities that may rely so heavily on volunteers as your organization does.
Well, yes, thank you, Sean. I do have advice, as you always know I do. One of the biggest challenges now with the National Housing Strategy, when we built our last building, we got funding from our municipal governments and from Housing Nova Scotia, and we did a lot of fundraising in that, and so we were successful in that. But since then, the housing strategy is rolled out. So when we went to Housing Nova Scotia, expecting a significant contribution to our new build, they said, well, we're not doing that. You go to CMHC. Housing Nova Scotia has given us some money, but the bulk of it is through CMHC. And I don't think CMHC is used to giving out money. They've been in the business of mortgages and loans. And I heard Evan Sidel talk about protecting the money, using it wisely, which is very good. But it's such a challenge to get access to that. From our perspective as a small organization that's totally volunteer, the amount of time and effort to go into that is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. But we're treated exactly the same way as a large developer in downtown Vancouver. So our assessment, when we first did that last year, I was absolutely shocked, because as a provider of 100% affordable, energy efficient housing with solar panels, we weren't given the points that I thought we should have got. If we had a big developer could have 30% of their housing affordable for 10 years only, and have no barrier-free units, which cost a lot more money, and that really didn't help us a lot. So it's the assessment that we are all the same, which is not right. The other thing is the government has talked a lot about big developers are not that interested in rural areas. They go for the big one. Community organizations have been trying for years to be able to access funding, and we are one of the very few small organizations. So there's something wrong in that process. To me, there should be a separate process for community nonprofit organizations and large developers.
Are you thinking smaller scale projects, smaller total dollar numbers, but with an easier administrative burden?
Well, I mean, it's going to be smaller dollar numbers anyways. We're building 12. We wanted to build 15. We couldn't get the funding, so we scaled back. And I mean, it's not so much the amount as how we are being assessed. We are not making a profit. We cannot make a profit in our rents. We're there to build affordable housing, and we're not getting profit for our shareholders. That's not the case. Why do we have to go through such a big challenge of getting this? If the government wants affordable housing in communities, trust the organizations to do that. You have to have some stuff in place to account for the funding in that. But why do we have to go through so many hoops to do the work that I think governments really should be doing in the affordable housing business? But we're willing to do that. But it is beyond the pale. I know of community organizations that have given up. They said we can't do it. It's just not making sense.
Sure. Colleen, I do have one quick question left. Mr. Chair, have I got any time remaining?
You got time for one more.
Okay. Well, look, I'll skip to the last one I had on my list. You mentioned that with respect to the wage subsidy and CEBA, notwithstanding a bit of a challenge through the credit union process, that generally speaking, some of these supports, and you mentioned the community support fund as well, were actually easy to access. They help organizations like yours. What lessons can we draw from those programs as we move forward to continue to support folks in communities like ours? What lessons can we draw from the COVID response that might actually lead to long-term permanent solutions for vulnerable Canadians?
Well, I think one thing is making it easy to access the funding is a good lesson. We access the funding, we've been using it very well, and we're reporting on it. So we're very accountable for that. So making it easier. But having, as I said, resilient communities that can withstand shocks is really where we need to be. So we need much more affordable housing. That is just an issue that is critical across the country. And in rural areas, we talk about homeless in Halifax, but why do we have them? They leave Antigonish to get services there. So they're coming from rural areas into the cities. And so more affordable housing and easier access, I would think, is what's important.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you both, Mr. St. Marie, followed by Mr. Massey. Gabriel?
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, welcome to all my colleagues, Ms. Dam, and our witnesses, Ms. Damoff and Ms. Massey. Thank you very much for your presentations. My first questions will be for Mr. Lukacs. And I'd like to thank you again, Mr. Lukacs, for having raised this important issue of air passengers' rights. My first question has to do with your presentation and also your exchange with Mr. Falk. When you look at what's occurred in other countries, what should the government have done to better protect travellers? What are the best practices that we've seen in other countries that we could have emulated? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The very first thing the government should have done is to declare and enforce passengers' fundamental right to a refund. This happened in the United States on April 3rd, 2020, when the US Department of Transportation issued an enforcement notice. In the European Union, it happened actually first around March 18th, 2020. And the European Union even went as far as suing some of its own states to ensure compliance with passengers' fundamental right to a refund. Had the government in Canada done so, it would have probably been much easier also to provide industry-wide relief, because there would not have been such a strong opposition to it publicly. The other aspect is that Canada should have followed the German model, Lufthansa's model, where the state assumes a substantial stake in the airline which is being bailed out in exchange for taxpayers' money. The 6% that was provided to Canada, to taxpayers in the current deal, dwarfs compared to the 20% in Germany, which actually has even an option to go all the way up to 25%. The last point is that those loans that were given to Air Canada were all, without exception of one, and these were unsecured loans. Maybe Air Canada has no sufficient assets as a collateral. I don't know. That's something to should have been investigated further. But in the absence of assets, equity is a reasonable way to secure that taxpayers receive a return on their investment.
Ouais, très intéressant. Merci beaucoup.
Well, that's highly interesting. Thank you very much. Why, in your opinion, did the government wait for over a year before acting? This is Air Canada first. Under the first part, we'll see what occurs with the other airlines. Why, in your opinion, did the government dilly-dally so long before acting?
It is difficult to understand the logic behind the government's failure to enforce passenger rights, although the problem is a long-standing one. It is just that the pandemic has brought the systemic issue to the forefront. The Canadian Transportation Agency, which is the federal body supposed to enforce passenger rights, has over the past 6 to 8 years turned from an independent regulator into effectively a lapdog of the industry. There's a serious concern of regulatory capture. So some of the lead was coming from that direction, but it also seems that the airline lobby seems to be profoundly active and efficient in persuading the government to not enforce consumer rights and instead just let the airlines do as they please.
Okay, merci.
Thank you. Could you speak briefly about how important it is to have a competitive system between carriers? Any fears of amalgamations? Before the pandemic, there was a proposed takeover by Air Canada of Air Transat. What would that mean to travellers as a result? And also, what about the regional routes and how important it is to keep them intact? Thank you.
With respect to the issue of competition, the deal between Air Canada and Air Transat would have significantly decreased competition over transatlantic routes and sun destinations from a medium concentration to high concentration market in terms of the data. It would have resulted in higher airfares and consumers paying more money. Certainly, Canada, even now, is suffering from lack of adequate competition. What we would need to do is to open our market for more airlines, even for carriage of passengers within Canada. Perhaps not all airlines, but airlines from trusted partner states, because it should not be a choice between Air Canada and WestJet only. In terms of regional routes, it's a very tough question because on the one hand, it may be very important for communities. On the other hand, we cannot expect airlines to operate a route which is not profitable. So if as a state, as a society, we decide that those regional routes are important, then airlines have every right to ask for subsidy for covering those specific costs.
Okay, merci.
Last question,
Oui.
Gabriel.
Okay, très bien.
Good. I heard a radio host in Montreal talk about whether the government should have a refund cancellation insurance for all tickets of all air travellers. What do you think of that idea?
It is an interesting idea, but it would again make consumers pay for what should be the airline's responsibility. I would much prefer to see the system that already exists in the Quebec Consumer Protection Act, Section 256, where any kind of service for the future, when it is being paid by consumers, the monies paid by consumers have to be paid in a trust account, they have to be kept in a trust account, and the airline is deemed to be the trustee. So that law in our position would already apply actually to Air Canada, although they would probably vehemently disagree with that. And what we would allow is that in situations like this, where somehow the airline says, well, we don't have the money, then actually the owners would become liable for refunding passengers, possibly personally, because they are not simply a business, but they are acting in a trustee capacity.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Massey. It'll be followed by Ms. Jansen. Brian, welcome to Finance. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you as always. Thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Loukakis, I want to start with your take with regards to, I don't know if you saw, NAV Canada finally ceased its studies on closure of airports, something I had been pushing for, and have a private members bill on that. It'll be interesting to see what will take place in the budget or upcoming deal with NAV Canada, because in it, on testimony at my committees and that I've been at, Mr. Bond, the CEO of NAV Canada, has said that they would not consider removing bonuses if they did get actually public funds as part of a package to deal with NAV Canada. But with that, we'll see what comes out in the details. What is your, I guess, your response to, I guess, those that are now, concerned about the process of dealing with Expedia and other parts of the complications of getting refunds? I'm concerned that it may not be even equal. You've pointed out some major problems in the deal, but one of the things I don't think gets a lot of attention is the complications for consumers going through third parties to try to recover their money.
Thank you for the question. Passengers do experience significant problems even with getting refunds from Air Canada directly. For example, passengers who used their vouchers to try to get a ticket and the second ticket was cheaper. We have reported passengers are being told, no, we're only going to refund your cheaper ticket, but not the difference between the two tickets. In terms of third-party providers, there are significant concerns. Expedia, FlightHub is a particularly bad offender as far as we can see so far. And in some cases, travel agents are actually asking passengers to pay an extra fee for getting their refunds, even though travel agents can keep their commission from the airline. So the solution and the answer to this would be and is that ultimately it is Air Canada's responsibility and the airline's responsibility to refund money that the airline has. They cannot pass on the buck to the various travel agents. This is another significant flaw in the deal, something that Air Canada has been pushing very hard for, but legally we have doubts about its validity. We are aware of a prior court decision which confirms that regardless of which intermediary is involved, still the airline has the same responsibilities.
So, and without addressing that, I mean, because the end reality is for the consumer, a phantom product was purchased and they're still going to have to pay out of pocket for that. And then there's also, maybe you can highlight between the third-party providers, aren't there benefits to the airlines and the third-party providers to make money off of consumers from the use of that service? And so it seems kind of unfair that when this happens, they would pay a second time for that. If there's a benefit for the structure they have in place, perhaps you can talk about that benefit.
Passengers are not supposed to be paying any extra fees for getting their refunds, and those demands by travel agents are legally unfounded. The potential benefit for Air Canada of getting refunds, giving refunds through travel agents is that in some cases there are deals where some of the commission is being paid in one way or another. So it's an arrangement that makes getting refunds and makes passengers access to refund harder and makes the accounting for Air Canada easier.
Okay. And you've mentioned the quick action that was taken in the European Union and also the United States to a lesser degree, but later. Is there? I'm not. I know you have a lot of experience. You've been to the Supreme Court of Canada and you litigated a number of different cases. I'm not sure if you're familiar as much with the competition laws in Canada. We have been studying that at Industry Committee, and it's been something I've been working on is the Competition Bureau doesn't have the tools that it needs to, and also our competition law is outdated. Do you have any comments about that? I don't know if you're familiar with all of that aspect, but I know for sure that that seems to be part of the problem. I've been a big proponent for a real airline bill of rights, but we've run into major problems with the Competition Act that's very antiquated.
I don't purport to be an expert on competition law. However, I'm aware of some of its aspects affecting passengers and affecting airlines. My understanding is that the Competition Bureau does not have the tools to deal, for example, with predatory pricing, where a large airline tries to effectively strangle to a small airline by engaging in a undercutting prices even below cost. And by the time a court order would be issued, an injunction would be issued, it may be too late for the small airline. It would be out of business. So I would agree to the extent that I see it from an airline perspective, a passenger rights perspective, a significant overhaul would be necessary for faster remedies for anti-competitive behavior of this nature. Whether one should give more powers to a government body, it raises some questions. Generally, we believe that independent decision makers, and I'm referring to independent of government, such as courts and judges who have tenure of office, should be making significant decisions. But certainly the laws could and should be updated to ensure that access to injunctions in such situations, and more generally, access to some interlocutory injunctions would be easier. It's a matter that we have come across last year in the context of refunds, that the federal courts are interpreting the legal test for interlocutory injunctions very, very narrowly in a way that it's in many cases virtually impossible to get, not only in competition, but also in case of trademarks and intellectual property aspects.
We will have to end that round there. You'll have another opportunity in a little bit, Brian. Turning then to Ms. Jansen, followed by Ms. Zurowitz. Tamara, 5-minute round.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lukacs. I really appreciate the perspective that you're coming from, that you're looking to ensure that taxpayers are getting good bang for the buck. It's very much appreciated. And I can't tell you how terrible this was in the very beginning when we were repatriating constituents. And there were families that were buying tickets, and then the flight would be canceled. They'd buy another ticket, flight would be canceled. Buy a third ticket, and the flight would be canceled. And they never received a refund. It was absolutely shocking. Could you tell me, you basically said that had the government made quick action against the airlines for doing this, like other countries, that they could have had a bigger impact on what the deal looks like today?
Yes, currently people are very upset. The experience that you have described of your constituents is not a one-off, not a unique, isolated incident. It is an experience that we estimated a number of millions of passengers have experienced. So any kind of bailout to the corporation, any kind of financial support is facing very significant social opposition, not only because it's not necessarily good use of taxpayers' money, but also because the airlines, the travel industry has squandered the public goodwill and consumer confidence.
Yes, absolutely. We were kind of looking at hoping you had an idea how many refunds were actually issued and how many are still left standing. Do you know the dollar figure?
How many refunds have been issued is more difficult. When we appeared before the Transportation Committee in December, our estimate was that it's a very conservative estimate that there were about $3.89 billion worth of refunds among the Canadian airlines, corresponding to 3.89 million passengers. As every estimate, it is based on data that we can just interpolate, because you may remember that Air Canada outright refused to provide numbers when they were asked by another House of Commons committee. So there is an additional layer of lack of transparency, which is troubling, that on the one hand, those airlines are seeking help from the public purse, yet we have not seen clear numbers and clear data on how much money they owe to passengers, how many passengers are affected.
Were there some airlines that were better than others when it came to refunds? I thought there were some that had different policies.
First, let me make a step back and say that airline policies don't matter because they cannot override the law. The law has been that you have to refund passengers, period and full stop. Unfortunately, the federal government failed to enforce that law. In terms of policies. In some ways, Air Canada was the worst offender in that they made a false proposition that if you bought a so-called non-refundable ticket, then they can just pocket your money and give you no services in return. That's a nonsense. That's an absurd. WestJet has made some statements back in November 2020 that they would gradually refund passengers whose flights were canceled by WestJet. We are seeing some progress with that, although in many cases what passengers are doing and what helps them to get money is actually doing a statutory chargeback under provincial statutes if they made a purchase through a credit card. With respect to Sunwing, probably they are also among the worst offenders. They first promised passengers to give them a refund as they should have, and then they said, sorry, we don't have enough money. Air Transat is also in with that. They have also been refusing to provide refunds.
Could you do me a favor? Could you explain one more time how the deal is set up and how it's bad for the taxpayer?
I don't have here the exact figures in front of me, but I can give you what I remember. In terms of the refunds, I do remember the numbers. The refunds are going to be funded, as I understand, from a $1.4 billion unsecured loan at an interest rate of 1.211%.
And when you mention unsecured loans, you're talking about the fact that they're saying we have no assets behind us, so therefore, we'll do our best to pay it back, but the government has absolutely no surety that it will be paid back.
That's right. There are no assets that could be seized if those amounts are not being paid back.
And do you expect that they would default on their loans? What's your thoughts on that?
It's hard to predict. We are not through this pandemic yet. What we have seen historically is that unsecured loans tend to become grants. I could easily see that once the public outrage over the $6 billion bailout Air Canada subsides, once it's no longer on the headlines of the news, the government may quietly just write it off. So having some form of legislation that states these loans cannot be written off certainly would help to alleviate those concerns.
And
okay, thank you both. We're at a time there, Tamara. Going to Ms. Sirowitz, and then again back to Mr. St. Marie. Ms. Sirowitz. You're muted, Julie.
I know I've been having trouble speaking today. Anyways, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the two presenters for their presentations, and I think for this very important discussion. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Lukacs, on air passenger rights. You've done a wonderful job in terms of just articulating what your concerns are with the deal. Perhaps we can go through maybe some of the good elements of the agreement. Would you say that it was the section around regional communities, sort of having air connection in the 7 communities that have been stated to the rest of Canada? Do you think that was a good part of the deal?
And the biggest concern we have is that those issues like ensuring job security and regional connectivity, which are undoubtedly important, were put on the same footing as the legal right of passengers to a refund. Refunds is a non-negotiable, absolute legal right under the law, while regional service, if it is not profitable, is a discretionary matter. So certainly, if we believe that those regional routes are important, then the taxpayers have to pay for it one way or another. That's a no-brainer, and we don't find anything objectionable about it. The trouble is that the two things have been mixed and the waters have been muddied, and we create the impression as if complying with the law was an optional, not a mandatory obligation for large corporations.
Okay, so what I want to try to do, because I always think it's always good to find a little bit of balance, and I think there's always a silver lining. There's always good news in addition to things that can be approved. So is there anything in the agreement that you think was positive? The sort of broad criteria around refunding customers, the commitment to sort of protecting jobs and pensions in the collective agreement, the restriction of the executive compensation and the buyback shares and the dividends, the broad criteria around the refund, as I had mentioned. Is there anything positive in the agreement that you think is in place?
Certainly the limitation on buybacks and on restricting was it bonuses or actual compensation?
I have here restricting executive compensation,
compensation,
buyback,
yes,
shares,
yes,
and dividends.
So those are positive measures, but in my opinion, they don't make up for all the shortcomings of this deal, unfortunately. The one point, if I take off for a moment my air passenger rights advocate cap and just think as a taxpayer, the most significant shortcoming I see is the low amount of equity that Canada acquired. Instead Canada should have acquired more equity in the company and less unsecured debt. That is probably the most important issue. From perspective of public policy, there should have been also more accountability for the individual executives who were involved in misappropriating passengers' money.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I wanted to try to see if there was anything positive in here. So at least we have a couple of important things. And I hope you'll also agree that sort of the broad criteria around refunding of customers is at least a positive first step, while there might be some improvements as we go along.
In our view, compliance with the law should not be a negotiating chip. This is the same way that it's not a negotiating chip whether one pays taxes or one can just go into a store and remove items from the shelf without paying. Compliance with the law and giving passengers refund is a legal right when the airline itself canceled the flights. It was a mistake to even agree to talk about it as if it was not an absolute right.
Thank you, Mr. Lukacs. I have one more question that's for our other guest today, Ms. Cameron. Ms. Cameron, you had mentioned support for a guaranteed basic income. Can you maybe talk a little bit about this? Are you talking about this as something that you think is important for Nova Scotia? And maybe if you could just talk to us about why you think it would be an important model to adopt.
Yeah, I think it's an important model for all of Canada, not just Nova Scotia. If we want healthy people, healthy communities, income plays a big role in that. With the CERB funding that came out, many people were moved out of poverty. The CERB was set at a level at just above the poverty line, and that made a big difference for a lot of people. We have people living in poverty because the policy states that they can only receive a certain amount if they're disabled, if they're on assistance, if they're single parents. It is kept below the poverty line, and that to me is not right. Making sure everyone has an income, a livable income, if that was in place before COVID hit, it would have saved all kinds of problems and people's lives. You wouldn't have people that are going from job to job just to make enough to barely get by. That with their job and with a guarantee, they would have enough money to do that and to be well. So to me, it's a no-brainer in the sense that people are ill, people are not well because they are living below the poverty line. So a guaranteed livable income, just as we have with the old age security is guaranteed supplement there, and what the government did with the CERB, I think should be continued, and we wouldn't be in such a housing crisis if people had sufficient fund to be able to afford housing.
Okay, we will have to end it there. Turning into Mr. St. Marie, followed by Mr. Messe. 2.5 minutes, Gabriel.
Oui, merci, Wayne.
Thank you, Wayne. Ms. Cameron, thanks for your presentation and for presenting the project that you take part in. It's very interesting. Now, if I understood you correctly, there needs to be a whole slew of models to support social housing, whether it be in urban centres or in towns or in communities where there are fewer residents. In your opinion, is part of the solution funding from Ottawa for affordable housing? Thank you.
Yes, it is. It's a big part of it, and that's why the housing strategy, I believe, was put in place. As you know, the federal government did a lot of input into affordable housing, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And my father was involved with the Veterans Land Act to help people get housing. Then the government moved away from that. Municipalities don't take responsibilities. So it has been a big issue, and it's been neglected for so long that we are really in a major crisis. And in order to get out of it, there needs to be partnership at all levels, federal, provincial, municipal, and with community members. But it should be done in a way that every partner is respected and trusted, which is not the case now. We are often talked to, told to, and without listening to what are the issues. I'm not saying a whole bunch of different models, but there just needs to be something that is different for profit developers from non-profit developers, I would think.
Oui, c'est très intéressant.
Well, thank you. Very interesting. Mr. Easter, you had something to say?
Yeah. On to Mr. Massey.
Okay, c'est bon. Ben, merci.
Okie doke. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Cameron, you mentioned about the historical, I guess, gap in housing, which we had a program we phased out. I used to work for the not-for-profit sector as well, too, and we have a lot of rebuilds that need to be done. Can you comment on that, how poorly municipalities are behind in terms of the current infrastructure to save some of the housing that has been languishing?
Well, I'm not sure I can answer that, because my sense from the municipalities is in Nova Scotia, they don't have a role in building and maintaining affordable housing. They do bylaws, they do all kinds of things. Our local municipalities have contributed and supported us from the very beginning of this. But in terms of, we were told very early on that they don't do housing. I'm hoping that's going to change. And I think in some places it's not the same all across the country, but that is not a mandate that the municipalities feel. There is definitely a role, and I would like to see them play a much greater role in affordable housing. My understanding is they can do very little if a place is run down. It either is condemned and torn down, and then the tenants have no place to live, or they continue to live in squalor, that they don't have the the tools, the power to be able to bring about changes. So I think there's a lot of things that could be done differently, and one of them is just we just need more stock. We just need more houses that are affordable.
Okay, I know I'm running out of time there, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you. Thank you both. Then turning to Mr. Kelly, followed by Mr. Damoff. And I think Ms. May wants a question. I believe Mr. Cummings, you do too. Mr. Kelly.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And to Mr. Lukakis, really interesting presentation and some of the comments that we've had so far. So I think a lot of Canadians were somewhat surprised by the approach of bailing out one company as opposed to presenting a package to an industry and leaving it up to any of the participants to decide whether to opt in to be bailed out or not. Could you give me give us a little more on that? You mentioned it in your opening statement, but didn't get a chance to elaborate.
Our concern is one, and it relates on the one hand to passenger refunds. There are passengers from WestJet, from Air Transat, from Sunwing, and from Porter, just to say a few, who are waiting for refunds. And those airlines, just like any other airline, owe those passengers a refund, but have not fully complied with that obligation. In fact, Air Transat and Sunwing has not complied with it at all. The concern from a taxpayer and a competitive market perspective is that giving a pile of money to one competitor while leaving the others hanging to dry skews the marketplace. It creates an uneven playing field. It gives an unfair competition to one competitor over the others. It harms also their consumers, and it harms the employees.
No, absolutely, but there seems to be an understanding that there are negotiations underway. So, do you expect to see a variety of different deals brought out in the coming days, or do you have any idea what they're doing?
We have no information, unfortunately.
Okay. So you said that no amount of subsidy will solve the problem. Now, when you said that, did you mean the problem of non-compliance with the law in terms of in refunds, or were there broader industry issues that you were referring to?
The broader issue of non-compliance with the law, not just with respect to refunds, but overall in passenger rights. What we already see is that when a passenger can choose between a European carrier, which is bound by the European laws and regulations, which is a gold standard, or a Canadian airline, they will choose the European airline. And we are going to see that trend intensify, especially with the US also perhaps tending toward improving passenger rights. So we have very strong competition in that regard, and we need to up our game if we would like Canadian Airlines to become competitive.
Okay, what do you expect some of these exceptions to be? Could you maybe list whether it's speculation or if you already know what you expect the airlines to invoke? Or in this case, Air Canada to invoke for a non-refund?
We expect that if there is a new wave of the current pandemic, or if there is another pandemic, or if there is a situation like September 11th, then they may try to use those provisions to refuse passengers to refund their own money for flights that never took place. This is a sharp contrast with the US standard. In the US, and after September 11th, airlines were refunding passengers. Even during the pandemic, the U.S. Department of Transportation very quickly gave marching orders to the airlines: you must refund passengers.
You hinted in your opening statement that you weren't sure that Air Canada really needed or was particularly seeking this deal, and yet the deal exists. Air Canada was quite well capitalized from the outset, but the effects on the industry are catastrophic. Would it be your position that refunds should have been made in full to everyone before negotiations even began for a bailout?
There's no doubt Air Canada wanted this deal. The question is whether they needed it objectively. That's unclear. Certainly, refunds should have been happening immediately as the flights were being canceled as soon as March and April 2020. And there would have been probably way more public sympathy, public appetite to provide some financial relief to airlines.
Right, and indeed, we need an airline industry in Canada, and particularly in all kinds of communities that we just rely on it. But are you? So would you? Do you think it is necessary to bail out the industry, or can this industry finance its way through the crisis while being obliged to refund its passengers?
It's quite possible that some airlines may need some financial assistance to weather this storm. What is, however, clear that Canada does not need airlines that disobey the law. Any kind of corporation that is trying to make a profit outside the rules of the game, outside the rules of fundamental rules of capitalism, which is based on respect to private property, those kind of corporations become a burden for taxpayers. And while they may take some money to replace them, they have to be replaced with corporations and with management of corporations that play by the rules, because that is how society is going to prosper, if everybody is obeying the law.
All right. Have I got time for another, or is that it, Wayne? You're on mute.
Thank you both. We'll go to Ms. Damoff,
Okay.
5 minutes, and then one question from Ms. May and one from Mr. Cummings.
Thank you, Chair, and it's an absolute pleasure to join this committee today. Thank you to both our witnesses. Ms. Cameron, I thoroughly enjoyed your testimony, and I now know why your MP speaks so highly of you, because it was really helpful and sort of speaks to my heart. I firmly believe that without safe, affordable housing, you can't do anything else. Everything flows from that. You can't get a job, you can't care for your kids properly, you can't get an education. So really, your testimony really resonated, and I wondered if you could speak a little bit more about, if we're going to have a sound, sustainable, solid recovery, how important it is for us to invest in housing and the resilient communities that you talked about.
Well, I think you've said it yourself. I mean, housing is the basic right that everybody needs to live. Without it, you don't have anything. As you said, there's no address, you can't get funds, education. And then from a healthy perspective, such a lot of people are living in very unhealthy situations, physically unhealthy, as well as mentally and socially, when there's drugs and violence in the area. That just exacerbates things. So to me, it's something everyone needs. I mean, it's obvious if you look at our statistics, and if you look at the health statistics, people on lower income, people living in poor conditions, are much more likely to be sick, and they're much more likely to put a greater burden on the healthcare system. Similarly, the justice system, dropping out of school. Every time a family moves, a child loses 3 months of school just from making that move. So it affects every aspect of life. And it is one of the most basic things: food, water, shelter, clothing. That is your basic right. So that is needed. And the homeless situation, the lack of affordable housing, is the tip of the iceberg when we're looking at poverty. That's what we see. Those are the symptoms of poverty.
Well, and I think, what you were saying is that this pandemic has shone a light that people like you have known for years. But I think it's shone a light on how those individuals who are homeless or without safe and affordable housing have been more at risk during the pandemic. I was absolutely fascinated by your community navigator and having that. One of the things that, and actually Sean and I were on Status of Women committee together when we looked at transitional housing and the need for more transitional housing for women. I've spoken to a woman here locally, Emily O'Brien, who's has been in prison, and the need for people who are coming out of prison to have transitional housing. And that community navigator seems like the type of thing incorporated into housing that just spells it's a recipe for success. How critical is it that we take a more holistic approach to housing as well, and includes in transitional housing as we're moving out of this pandemic?
It is absolutely critical, and with our model of focusing on the social, the environmental, and the fiscal is very important. That's a holistic approach. But just with the community navigator, whose role it is to assist the people, the tenants, access the resources they need in the community to live well. I live very close to public housing, and I see the problems. There's 700 units, and one person said, well, she is the navigator for the property manager navigator for 700 people. That is not sustainable. People are trying to get out of the public housing and to come into us because it is a safe, good place to live. Everybody needs support at some point. And if you have good, affordable, safe, affordable housing, that breaks the cycle of poverty for many people. It helps them to move out. And we've had a couple of success stories, single mothers finishing education, getting a better job, and moving on. That's the sort of thing you need. But that support is key. And just putting a roof over somebody's head and then leaving them on their own is not going to solve it. And people have various levels of needs, and we don't provide counseling and that sort of thing. We connect them to those resources. And sometimes it's a very simple thing that they need. So it is to be sustainable, I think that's extremely important.
I think that's my time. Thank you.
We will have to move on. We'll go to one question from Elizabeth May and one question from James Cumming.
Thank you for your generosity, Mr. Chair. And to Colleen Cameron, how lovely to see you. I wanted to ask you in terms of affordable housing, I know you have deep roots in the anti-condition movement and the work of Monsignor Moses Coady. I'm wondering specifically, do you think the cooperative housing model would be useful when we're looking at new ways to make sure we get people housed?
Well, as you said, I'm a big proponent of co-ops and the cooperative movement. I grew up in that movement. I think there's a role for different forms of affordable housing. We ourselves didn't go down the route of co-op housing. We're a charitable organization providing affordable housing. A lot of the co-op housing now, people are renting, whereas in the past, if you think of the Antigonish movement and Tompkinville down in Reserve Mines in Cape Breton, people cooperated and built their homes, which they then ended up owning, which was equity. So that's a very different sort of model. And I think it's a very good one, one of a number of models that would be needed to do this, to provide affordable housing for everyone. So I don't see one solution, but I see different models. The cooperative housing at the moment has been struggling, and it's a challenge for some of them to improve and move on. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different things there, but yeah, co-op housing, if people could end up owning them, that would be fabulous.
Okay, I believe James had
Mr.
to
Chair,
leave.
yeah,
Go ahead.
He had a 3 o'clock hard
Okay.
stop in another meeting, so James will miss his question.
All right, great. We should have put him first. I should have moved him up. Okay, with that, we will have to suspend to the next panel. Thank the two witnesses for appearing, and we got as many questions as we normally do in. So that's a good thing, even though we're a little tighter in time. So thank you both for your presentations today. We appreciate you appearing, and we'll suspend for 2 minutes until we and go to the next panel. Meeting suspended. This is meeting number 34 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. And as all the witnesses know, we're doing a study on COVID-19 spending programs and related monetary policy. So first of all, I want to thank all the witnesses for coming. And we'll start with Jacques Letourneau, the president of CSN. Welcome. Jacques, go ahead, floor is yours. And try and keep your comments to about 5 minutes if you could.
Oui, j'essaie de faire fonctionner.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get my camera to work properly, and I can hear a huge amount of echo in my headset. Can you hear me okay?
Translators hearing okay, Mr. Clerk? Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Letourneau.
Vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, thank you very much for this invitation to appear before you today. Unfortunately, I'm hearing quite a lot of echo in my headset, and it's really quite disturbing. I love hearing what I have to say, but in my head quietly.
Why don't we, Jacques, why don't we see if the IT people can fix that, and we'll go to the next witness and then come back to you. So, Mr. Clerk, if you could have the IT people work on that. Then turning to Patrick Sullivan, President and CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Sullivan, you're on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much to the committee. Good evening. I apologize in advance. I have a cold. It's just a cold. I've been COVID tested a number of times, but I apologize if I cough during the middle of my presentation. I've decided to make my presentation rather short tonight, so I don't believe that I will take anywhere close to 5 minutes because I just wanted to make a very firm point. My name is Patrick Sullivan. I'm the President and CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. The Halifax Chamber of Commerce is a best practice business advocacy organization that continuously strives to make Halifax an even more attractive city in which to live, work, and play. Together with the approximately 1,700 member businesses that represent over 65,000 employees, we act as a single powerful voice through the Chamber to promote local business interests. I do want to thank the federal government for its prompt and meaningful support for our business communities throughout the pandemic. Programs like the Canadian Emergency Business Account, the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, which we utilize to retain our full-time staff, and the Canadian Emergency Rent Subsidy were all crucial to the survival of many businesses, both large and small. It's apparent, though, that while vaccines are rolling out throughout the country, many of our hardest hit sectors like tourism and hospitality will once again feel the impacts of COVID-19 throughout the balance of 2021. Businesses need predictability. They need a view of what that business can look like or will look like in order to plan for the coming months. And we ask that the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy and the Canadian Emergency Rent Subsidy be extended until December 2021 to those highly affected sectors to remain viable and return to full capacity in 2022. With over $1 billion lost in revenues in Nova Scotia during the 2020 tourism and hospitality high seasons, we must keep these sectors and businesses afloat, not only for the employment of many Canadians, but for our continued economic growth and recovery from COVID-19. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan, and we'll give Mr. Letourneau a little more time. We'll turn to the Hotel Association of Canada. Ms. Baker, Vice President, Policy and Public Affairs. Ms. Baker, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci pour l'invitation d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui.
Thank you for the invitation to be with you today.
Work at Canada's hotels are just like every other Canadian. We want to get back to normal as soon as possible. But our industry is unique. We are in the business of bringing people together face to face at conventions, weddings, or just visiting family. And that's simply not possible right away. For our sector, the end of this pandemic will not happen quickly with the flip of a switch. We continue to face a balancing act. On the positive side, a potential recovery is on the horizon with vaccines underway that could lead to a possible domestic tourism recovery for some segments such as resorts this summer. In this scenario, if we get most Canadians vaccinated by June, the government will need to pivot quickly to allow for a safe reopening and invest in stimulating our recovery to maximize the summer tourism season. But the reality is, right now we find ourselves in a third wave. People are encouraged to stay home, domestic and international borders remain closed, and mass gathering bans are still in place. Unfortunately, what this means is it is very likely that we will lose the most important season for our industry again in 2021. In this scenario, where restrictions are still necessary for the summer, the government will need to provide financial support for the tourism and hospitality sectors to survive until a recovery is possible. While most other sectors can bounce back quickly, once restrictions are lifted, we cannot. Business travel will take time to pick up. International visitors come mostly in the summer, not the fall or the winter. The conferences and events that drive our business in the off-season take months of planning and lead time. Most festival and event organizers have been forced to cancel any planned activities for this summer and fall. The challenges we expect to encounter until the end of 2021 are not the result of individual business decisions. They are the result of the final stages of this pandemic. We have every confidence that once COVID is completely behind us, Canadian tourism will rebound and conventions and major events will resume. But that recovery will be further down the road for us and certainly won't be happening in a meaningful way this summer. Until a recovery is possible for seasonal and events-based businesses, the wage and rent subsidy programs will remain a lifeline for hotels. As other sectors bounce back quickly after June, it is both prudent and practical for the government to tailor these support programs to sustain those industries most affected by the pandemic. Our member survey from March showed that 70% of Canadian hotels will go out of business without an extension of the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy and the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy to the end of the year. Simply put, if the government does not extend these programs past June, we will lose major segments of the hotel industry. The government deserves credit for rolling out these programs quickly and for providing tailored debt solutions to the hardest hit. These programs are the reason we still have an industry today. But our members are reeling from the worst year in their history and facing the second worst year in 2021, with very little hope that we will have a summer season. Now is not the time to pull away from the sectors that will lag behind through no fault of their own. We heard a strong commitment to support the hardest hit businesses in the speech from the throne and the fall economic statement. In the upcoming federal budget, we need to hear a clear commitment that the government will support our sector through to the end of the pandemic and the end of 2021. Specifically, we need to see an extension and enhancement of CEWS at 75%, targeting hard-hit industries until the end of 2021, and an extension and enhancement of the CERS program for hard-hit businesses, including deeper support for medium-sized businesses. That commitment in the budget would give our businesses the confidence and predictability they need to get to the other side. Canadians want to and will travel again. And when the time comes, Canada's hotels will be ready. We have invested in an industry-wide enhanced standard of health and safety protocols and remain committed to the health and safety of our guests and employees. We are ready to continue supporting essential travel, hosting events, hockey tournaments, and weddings. And we are ready to welcome back guests when restrictions are lifted. But without continued government support and tailored relief measures, many hard-hit businesses like ours will fail. That means long-term unemployment and lost capacity for the anchor businesses like hotels that enable tourism here in Canada, the most beautiful country in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Baker. Then we'll go back to Mr. Letourneau, President CSN. Floor is yours, Jacques.
Bien, merci.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm delighted to speak to you today about issues to do with the pandemic and the various measures that have been put forward by the Canadian government to support workers. First, right off the bat, I'd like to congratulate the Canadian government for the efforts that have been made to date to support those that have been hard hit by the public health and economic crisis. At the CSN, we represent folks from the cultural sector, hotel sector. I heard Ms. Baker talk about the importance of supporting that sector. It is clear that for a union organisation like the CSN, the Canadian government needs to continue to take advantage of low interest rates to support workers across the board, and by supporting the wage subsidy program, among others, so that folks from the cultural and tourism and hotel sectors can weather this storm, which is just so tough for everyone. The CSN, just as the Quebec government did recently alongside the other provinces and territories, is calling on the federal government to increase the Canada Health Transfer to 25%. We believe that the current crisis in the health and social network sectors requires major investments, particularly in a context, as we know full well, where there'll be an aging population over the upcoming years across Quebec and across all of Canada. We firmly believe that the provinces and territories need the financial means required to fund their housing, whether it be long-term care facilities. We can even take advantage of this time to be innovative and deal with seniors' housing. So at the CSN, we stand firmly behind the provinces across Canada that are calling for a substantial increase in the Canada Health Transfer. As I mentioned, the workers' assistance programs need to be extended, and it's my belief that the federal government needs to take advantage of this opportunity to overhaul the employment insurance system in Canada. The crisis has attested to the fact that self-employed workers, seasonally workers, and a whole host of others aren't currently covered by the EI program. So we need to look at the silver lining of the crisis to modernize and overhaul the coverage of atypical workers. And we believe that an overhaul of the EI system should be put forward by the government. As far as economic recovery is concerned, as a union central body, we're focusing on a green recovery that will, in fact, further focus on sustainable development. In fact, we have a fund in the CSN that helps to provide assistance to companies that are prepared to go green and support a green recovery, including transitioning towards far more ecological ways of manufacturing that will, by extension, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and carbon footprint. And from a manufacturing standpoint, we want a more targeted approach in Quebec to support the Lévis shipbuilding sector. For years, the Canadian government has been saying that it's in its shipbuilding structure or program, the Lévis port would be overhauled. And there's the icebreakers that are also an important issue. So you can imagine that for Quebec in general, a shipbuilding sector and represents thousands and thousands of both direct and indirect jobs. So that's the crux of the matter. They're the couple of comments I wanted to make in the 5 minutes that was allocated to me. I'd like to thank you for your attention and tell you that we're fully available to you if you wish to discuss these issues further: public finances, social and economic development, so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacques. I expect there will be some questions. Before I turn to the last witness, the people on the lineup for questions will be first Mr. Falk, and then Mr. Fragascadas, and on to St. Marie and Mr. Massé. So turning to our last witness, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Philip Hemmings, head of the Canada Desk Economics Department. Welcome, Mr. Hemmings. Floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to appear before the Standing Committee on Finance. This presentation draws largely on the OECD Economic Survey of Canada that was published on March the 11th. Our report is generally positive about the suite of economic policy measures that was introduced in 2020 and the subsequent evolution of those measures. The initial policy response is viewed as being appropriately rapid. The steps taken are also seen as having performed a reasonably good job in ensuring income support to those households and businesses most severely affected. Canada was ranked as having one of the largest packages of fiscal support in an international comparison the OECD made in autumn last year. Canada's package at that time, when we added it up, was worth around 13 percentage points of GDP. Other countries with large fiscal packages in this comparison were Italy, Germany, Australia, and Japan. We'd also underscore that prudent fiscal policy in Canada over past years has helped provide scope for the sizable fiscal support. Canada's menu of support has become more targeted, which is welcome. Notably, there has been the transition from the Canada Emergency Response Benefit to the more focused benefits, including the Canada Recovery Benefit, CRB. To be sure, there will be scope for technical improvements to some of these schemes, the schemes that are still operating. For instance, our report flags that the 50% clawback rate of the CRB could perhaps be dissuasive to individuals returning to employment. Our report emphasizes that for the time being, a focus on keeping these supplementary channels of support open is appropriate to help economic recovery. Financial assistance for households should ensure gaps in support are covered, and for businesses, continued focus is needed on nurturing their recovery. It is worth emphasizing, I think, that even with the retention of supplementary support, the very large deficit generated in 2020 will partially unwind. A shift back from blanket support suggests smaller outlays. Also, the recovery process itself, unless reversed by another shock, will bring deficit reduction through revenue increases and diminished spending demands. The crisis has raised a question as to whether the safety net provisions available in normal times are adequate. The recent commitment to introduce automatic tax filing for simple returns, partly so that more low-income households receive the tax credits, is welcome in this regard. In addition, permanent change to income support may be required to make social safety nets more reliable, timely, and effective. This is challenging to implement. Our report suggests that one route would be for provinces and territories to upgrade their safety net welfare provisions, possibly with financial assistance from federal government. In principle, a guaranteed income scheme offers another solution. However, our report concludes that such a scheme is likely to be overly expensive and may reduce incentives to work. While support programs should remain on offer while the economy is fragile, a clear and transparent roadmap for preventing a spiraling public debt burden is needed. Canada's past record in federal deficit and debt suggests that to date, broadly defined fiscal rules have worked adequately. However, a more precise rule may provide a useful anchor for reining in the debt burden. Our survey and previous ones have specifically suggested the introduction of a numerical debt to GDP target. Finally, I think it's worth underscoring, and this is something emphasized in our report, that a successful post-COVID economy also requires structural reforms that do not necessarily involve direct fiscal costs. To help the business sector, our report in particular urges faster progress on the removal of non-tariff barriers between provinces. It also supports the continued attention to the competitiveness and quality of telecommunication services. In addition, it identifies scope for improving business insolvency processes. For households, the report advocates the creation of more affordable housing through measures that encourage the building of more homes, for instance, through lighter planning regulation. This brings my introductory comments to an end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hammings, and thank you all for your presentations this afternoon. And we'll start with Mr. Falk, a 6-minute round.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to start off by thanking all the witnesses. Very interesting presentations. So thank you for coming to committee today. Mr. Hammings, I'd like to start with you. I was quite fascinated with the information that you provided. One of the things that you provided was the necessity for a plan. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? How important is it that that the government comes up with the plan for reopening the economy, and what should be some of the fiscal anchors inside of that plan?
Well, as I mentioned, I mean, the near-term priority has to remain the recovery of the economy, and we underscore the importance of keeping these sort of supplementary support programs open until the economy really is on a firm footing. However, we do emphasize that there is a need to look towards a fiscal plan that ensures that you don't have a spiraling public debt in the further out.
Okay, there was a report today that house prices year over year in Canada have risen by over 30%. That's problematic, especially when you talk about affordable housing. Would you have any recommendations for that?
Yeah, Canada is among the other country I work in is Norway, and there are other examples around the world at the moment of countries where the house prices have continued to rise quite steeply through the pandemic. I mean, what we're facing here is, if you like, this sort of classic situation where, in order to help the economy, the interest rates have been reduced. But this further fuels you already had fairly strong increases in prices before the crisis, and overall household incomes have been supported, so the demand for housing has continued. I mean, as I mentioned, among our solutions to this, our long-term calls are often for efforts to try and increase the supply of housing, and one move there can be to try and look at building and planning regulation to see if there are ways of allowing for more accommodation to be built that way. I think one thing I would add to this is that we don't have much of this in our report because it's really not clear at the moment, but I think we're going to have it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to the geography of housing demand in the coming next while, because we know that there's going to be some sort of permanent shift towards more teleworking. It's the scale of that and the nature of it will be quite interesting, and the impact on the housing markets will be interesting.
Well, thank you for that insight. Ms. Baker, in your pre-budget submission to this committee, you talked about the anxiety being experienced among many of your employees, and also the fear that a lot of your long-term experienced staff were going to be seeking employment outside of the industry. How are things looking on that front within from the Hotel Association's perspective?
Sure. Thank you for the question. You're absolutely right. I think our employees are scared and anxious about their future employment prospects. We employ some of Canada's most vulnerable populations. 60% are women. We have millennials, immigrants, visible minorities. All of these vulnerable groups have been disproportionately impacted by this pandemic. And they're scared for the future. Many are facing limited retraining options due to language skill barriers and other socioeconomic factors that we need to take into consideration. And the future of our industry right now is frankly uncertain. We find ourselves, like I said, in a third wave situation, and if we don't have extensions and enhancements to these critical programs, 70% of our hotels will be forced to close their doors, and that leaves our employees, of course, in a very vulnerable situation. And we need these extensions and enhancements made so that we can hang on to our employees, get to the other side, so that they do have a future that they can look forward to.
Thank you. When this current wave passes, you talked about the need to be able to respond quickly. and you're very optimistic that your business will return, that your hotels again will see occupancy. How important is it that the government has a plan for accommodating that in a timely manner?
Oh, it's very important. Critical to reopening. The borders, of course, play a role in that. Mass gathering bans, for instance. We do need a framework that gives some certainty about reopening safely and as soon as possible. That is indeed critical. I mean, hotels are critical pieces of infrastructure in our communities, and when people get the permission structure and encouragement from government to move around safely, we are going to be ready to do that. But again, without these critical support programs in place, our hotels won't be standing. So we do need to have a plan in place that allows us, gives us the predictability we need to ensure that we can keep our doors open and that we are indeed ready when Canadians are able to start traveling again. And we are confident that we do know that Canadians want to travel. We've all been in this position for over a year now, and people are anxious and eager to start moving around again. And when restrictions are lifted, we need to make sure that our hotels are standing to be able to accommodate them.
Last quick question, Ted.
Okay, thank you. Back to Mr. Hemmings. You talked about the fiscal anchor of debt to GDP. Is that the measurement that government should be looking at?
It's one way of ensuring that you bring public debt under control. I mean, historically, Canada seems to have, in a way, done reasonably well through a mechanism, essentially fairly broad fiscal targets. They're not terribly precisely defined, but that kind of system can work if there's, if you like, sufficient political will behind those broad objectives. But it can also be useful to in addition, have more precise fiscal rules, and this can help governments keep things on track. And our recommendation is that this is something that could be thought of to help bring the public debt burden down from the levels it's reached with the crisis.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Thank you all on that round. Mr. Fragaskatis, followed by Mr. St. Marie. Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to ask Mr. Hemmings, thank you, sir, for your presentation. Very interesting, and always appreciate hearing from the OECD. Your reports are great, and the committee's better off when we have a chance from an organization of your stature to hear testimony. When you were speaking, I was reminded of the presentation given the other day here at the committee virtually by the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber made the argument, if I can summarize it, basically they expect that the pent-up demand in the Canadian economy will be such that post-pandemic that will sustain long-term economic growth in a very real and very significant way. And the advice that the Chamber gave was that the federal government should therefore look at investing in areas that will boost Canada's competitiveness and productivity. They gave examples like research and development, broadband expansion, interprovincial trade barriers, which you've mentioned here at the committee. Would you, first of all, I heard something along those lines in your presentation. And do I understand you correctly? And if so, could you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly there seems to be quite a strong consensus. It's not just us at the OECD, the IMF as well, and also within Canada. The interprovincial trade barriers are something that if there could be faster progress on identifying where these barriers can be reduced, that would be good for the Canadian economy in the long term. And also, I think, I mean, Canada's not alone in needing to pay attention to ensuring that you have affordable, good quality broadband and access to that. I mean, it's a mixture of policy on competitive markets, but also, of course, there's a public investment dimension to that, especially when it comes to the infrastructure for remote areas and so on and so forth. It's quite a complicated policy area.
Well, thank you very much. No, it's an interesting point because this downturn economically has taken a different form. I think it's fair to say that it is not quite like economic downturns of the past, and therefore requires some creative thinking and pointing towards anything that will boost productivity and competitiveness. And we've just given some examples here. I'm sure we could list many more, but your point is well taken. I also want to ask you, Mr. Hemmings, I remember about a year and a half ago when the emergency programs were being put in place, when they were being refined. Some of my friends in the opposition, there were some in the media as well, saying that the government was doing too much. The government should hold back, making an argument more or less, although they did not use the word, but it was an argument for austerity in many ways. I just wonder what your thoughts would be if we just imagine for a moment, the federal government did not go ahead and introduced emergency programs. Or if they did, if they were much more restrained in nature. The programs that have been introduced have been generous, but have held up the Canadian economy, in my view. And I mean, we've heard that same view articulated here from experts that have testified in recent weeks and months. What is your view? If the Canadian government did not put in place the various emergency programs, where would the country be right now?
Well, you'd have a lot of households struggling, I guess, compared to where you are now. I mean, I think in the situation that governments faced in March and April last year, there was a high degree of uncertainty. A lot of governments, including the Canadian government, were trying to think of ways of supporting households and businesses in a very rapidly evolving situation. I think, for me, Canada was on the right side of the equation in the sense it moved quickly and it moved quite boldly with support programs. It's quite possible that with hindsight, of course, you can look at the programs, and this is not only true for Canada, I think elsewhere, is that some of these emergency programs didn't, hit the targets as accurately as you might like a good program to do. But the point was expediency at the time. And you had the fiscal room to do this. And so I think that was the, how shall I put it? You're on the.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Hemmings, but I only have a minute left, and you said something there that I think, no, not at all. You said something there that's very interesting to me. Canada had the fiscal room to do this. Could you expand on that?
Well, in the sense that you have a relatively, your public debt burden is relatively low compared to many other OECD countries, and borrowing costs are fairly low. And that, in a way, this is partly why in good times it's good to be aiming for creating that kind of fiscal space. It's to deal with situations just such as this one, so that you can, for instance, increase your debt to GDP ratio in a short space of time by, say, 15 percentage points. You can do it, and you still haven't got an astronomical debt burden. So that's, again, it comes back to the point where when the economy is back on an even keel, that there should be attention to bringing things back down under control so that you're ready for the next thing that we hope won't happen, of course.
No, certainly. Thank you very much for that.
We will have to end it there, and we will go to Gabriel St. Marie, followed by Brian Massey. Gabriel?
Oui, merci, Wayne.
Thank you, Wayne. Hi, everyone, and thanks for all being here and for your presentations. My first questions will be for Mr. Letourneau. Thanks for your presentation and how important it is to support those who don't have jobs in the hardest hit sectors, hotels, tourism, that will do it tough for as long as the pandemic lasts. Ottawa is attempting to finance or fund healthcare, and the Parliamentary Budget Officer and the Conference Board has demonstrated that the provinces won't be able to support the expenses in healthcare, so Ottawa has to do its role. We need an overhaul of the employment insurance system. And in fact, what Mr. Paul Huss said, and the government of the Bank of Canada, the previous one, said that at the start of the pandemic, the whole system collapsed, and how important it is to support seasonal and atypical and self-employed workers. Now, in the Davie shipbuilding yard. But first of all, let me talk about the green recovery. In the US, they're debating the need for a multi-billion-dollar recovery program, and Minister Freeland, will be handing down her budget coming very shortly. So could you please comment on the other issues, but also elaborate on what you expect in any recovery plan that might be announced? Response. Well, I think that with the economic recovery, there's a infrastructure program which is crucial, and I think that the OECD, the IMF, the UN has also said that we need to take advantage of the crisis to head in a new direction. In Canada, that means stopping direct support of the fossil fuel industry. And to our minds, it's quite clear and straightforward. If we want to build Canada differently and have sustainable economic development, we need to make different choices. And we also need to focus on service-oriented jobs. The industrial and manufacturing sectors are important. They have to be well positioned, as I said, in the case of the Davies shipyard. But all the service sectors have to be well supported. I'd like to come back to what Ms. Baker said in response to Mr. Fall's question. The hotel and tourism sectors are important. We know that in the next summer period, unfortunately, we won't be able to open up the hotel and tourism sector again as we would have hoped. And the sector relies on skilled workers. When we support companies, when we support workers, we're ensuring that we need to ensure that there's no labour shortage. And we know that across Canada, there is a labour shortage problem. Therefore, we mustn't have those folks from those sectors leaving the sector to work elsewhere. That is why the social security net is just so important. Now, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I heard about the huge increase in the cost of rents. In Quebec, there are over 1 million workers that earn less than $15 an hour. Now, unfortunately, oftentimes these workers are even unionized ones and that live on the poverty line. Now, as other speakers have said today, they've focused on the importance of funding social housing, building new social housing units, of social housing co-ops to support the middle class, to support workers who often have limited incomes. So when the cost of the real estate market explodes as it has in Montreal and Vancouver and Toronto, well, it becomes untenable for folks in the middle class. So I wanted to respond to Mr. Sainte-Marie's question, but also take this opportunity. And Mr. Eming said, when it comes to the OECD, had Canada not made the efforts that it did to support the middle class, it would have been a disaster. Just like the working class in the US suffered in the absence of policies and a social security net because the Trump administration refused to put one in place. So on that note, the Canadian government did do a good fair share of the work and didn't hesitate. And as Mr. Eming said, Canada's debt will be paid back through economic recovery. If we launch into austerity measures again, once again, we're going to destroy the social security net, and that would be a disaster for, unfortunately, when it comes to future crises. Thank you.
Gabriel.
Final question. When it comes to tax fairness, businesses have closed and folks have turned to the web giants like Amazon. Should Ottawa levy or tax these web giants, especially when it comes to their bottom line. Well, that was actually in my presentation, but I skipped over it. And I'm sure you read the written brief that we tabled recently. But we do indeed believe that the government should put in place a tax on the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons, until such time as the tax measures slated by the OECD can be implemented. I think that the Liberal Party of Canada undertook to put such tax in place in the last election campaign. There needs to be a temporary tax on the GAFAs for the 2021 budget. It's urgent, and of course we must, of course, respect Canadian, or rather Quebec companies, and who pay taxes to the Canadian government, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you both for that passionate exchange. We'll turn to Mr. Massey, who will be followed by Ms. Jansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Makes for good TV. My question to Ms. Baker, I am part of a border community. I represent Windsor across from Detroit, and we have, Wayne and I both serve in the Canada-U.S. Parliamentary Association, and so we've had extensive ties with tourism with the United States. Now, when Canada held the Vancouver Olympics, we moved the then Canadian Tourism Commission out to Vancouver, and there was more of a concentrated attempt to get visitation from Europe and other parts of the world, being like overseas, and it's kind of pushed down our American numbers a little bit. So that went down over the different years. But can you tell us, through your members, their experiences right now in border communities, because there's tourism in general across the country that's down. Some things when they had been opening up a little bit were covered, but in border communities, I think there's an extra layer of difficulty because we still cannot get at any of the customers previously that we had before, everything from entertainment, but also to visitation in hotels.
Sure, thank you for the question. The best solution is just getting people moving, getting our customers back as quickly as possible. And obviously the borders, reopening plays a critical role in that. I would say that, we of course, the rural and resort hotels should see a decent summer, although some of the, provincial travel barriers do remain a risk. But where we do see, a big risk right now is the downtown and airport hotels, those in the major urban centers, which are dependent on major events and attractions. That's what gets people moving into those cores, and we, it's likely that they're going to perform very, very poorly, not just this summer, but for the remainder of 2021. People do want to travel, and just at this point, we are hopeful that we will start to see some of those restrictions lifted, and we can get people moving around again. I would have to guess that, of course, we're going to see domestic travel pick up first, and then followed by international travel and visitors once we do get some of the borders open. But as I said earlier, we do need a framework that gives some certainty about reopening safely, and as soon as possible. That is a critical part of the equation, and just getting people back moving and back into our hotels.
Okay, and there's been a proposal from the Wilson Center. This is a think tank organization in Washington. It's with Canadian businesses. There's also been the Canadian Business Council, and I've been pushing for a border task force to be created. We used to have more of a working organization. There's the COVID task force right now, which is the cabinet and whoever they decide to consult. But what we've seen in the past on border communities is some of the programs that have been instituted become quite complicated. Some are outdated. Some need improvement, like Nexus. We changed some of the things to make it more accessible and get higher signups and so forth. Do you think that's something an organization like yours would like to participate in? I know that there's others that are now going on board with this type of philosophy, with the chambers of commerce, manufacturers, and so forth, looking to be part of more of an ongoing management style to help advocate and develop policies, even post-COVID, that would help the free flow of traffic, goods and services. And we've even seen that for tourism as well too, because there's just so many border complications right now. It should be more of an ongoing working process versus that of waiting month by month.
I mean, being part of the conversation is always welcome. You know, hotels are critical infrastructure as part of the overall travel and tourism economy. So we all have a role to play. And in fact, you know, there is a critical role that we play in the economy. And as I said, you know, the border conversation, as you mentioned, is a critical piece of that. So always welcome the opportunity to continue the dialogue, have the conversation, and see how we can all work together, because we do share, at the end of the day, the ultimate goal of getting people moving around again.
Okay, great. Moving over to Mr. Letournier, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. When you mentioned shipbuilding, I always hear at the back of my voice a former colleague, Peter Stauffer, used to yell, "What about shipbuilding?" in the House of Commons all the time at every opportunity. And we have the United States with their procurement policies on Buy America, Buy American, the Jones policy, a series of incentives to do domestic procurement. I don't see a contradiction for Canada to do some of that, especially for military, Coast Guard, and so forth. What's your opinion on, you know, I think we could get more assertive and aggressive, really, quite frankly, on that procurement policy. And some of this we have to do anyways, outside of stimulus for COVID. What's your thought about using and leveraging those elements? And if we are able to do that, maybe perhaps we could do co-agreements with the United States if possible. It might be a way of joining together as opposed to being isolated right now outside of their entire policy, because that's kind of where we stand.
Well, I think that it's possible to both enter into agreements with the US and position ourselves in Canada with the three existing shipyards. It's been for a number of years that the Levy shipyard has been calling for its fair share. There's Irving in Halifax, there's the Vancouver shipyard, and in December 2019, the government had pre-qualified the Davie shipyard and made it part of its shipbuilding strategy. So it was in the government's plans. But unfortunately, if there's no immediate plan for the Davie shipyard, it's hard to keep the labour there. So Mr. Trudeau's undertaking, well, we were surprised to hear recently that the Seaspan shipyard in Vancouver had also qualified for the Diefenbaker shipyard. So I think that a shipyard policy in Canada, which should be autonomous and independent, but it can be also in line with what's happening in the US. But first and foremost, we need cohesion within Canada. Unfortunately, over recent years, the fact of the matter is that Quebec has been left by the wayside, whereas the Halifax and Vancouver shipyards have received a number of shipbuilding contracts. So I think we need to strike a balance back home in Canada and ensure that Quebec has its place. And Davies is the biggest shipyard in Canada, I'd remind everyone, and it is the shipyard that was successful in delivering on an ambitious major project, the Obelix project, a few years back. So I do think it's possible to discuss these issues with our North American partners, but we need a maritime naval strategy which is in line with our production capacity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. We'll go to Ms. Jansen, followed by Ms. Koutrakis. Tamara?
Thank you. Mr. Hemmings, the OECD mentioned in their March 11 report that the COVID recovery process is an opportunity to build more resilient economy that's fairer and greener. Now, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland used that exact same term recently, calling this pandemic a political opportunity. And quite frankly, Canadians find that beyond the pale. My constituents are losing their businesses, their livelihoods, their mental health. People I speak to on the phone are crying because they're losing everything. And it feels like the government plans to kick us when we're down. Does this really seem to you like an opportunity to drastically change our economy?
I think certainly what our report aims to emphasize is, as I've said, is that the key thing right now is to keep these supplementary forms of support to households and businesses keep these things going while the economy is fragile. So while there are people struggling, you need these extra support schemes. But it's true that the pandemic does also give us some opportunities. So, for instance, if governments are thinking of, in addition to supplementary support programs, they're thinking, okay, let's try and shift the, reduce the amount of energy wastage by some programs to encourage people to isolate their homes better than they're isolated right now. That's one of the directions that you can move in. Now, that's not a direction that would necessarily put people out of work. In fact, it ought to be creating some work.
Okay.
So I don't think that the intention is particularly to.
Sorry, my time is short and I have two more questions.
All right.
I'd like to quote our beloved Canadian writer Rex Murphy from the National Post, who recently wrote the following: "It's not right, it's not proper that politicians at any time play politics under the cover of tragedy. It is also neither right nor proper to use a crisis to bring in policies or programs that, absent such a crisis, they would not bring in or could not bring in. It's equivalent to saying, well, we could do such and such in normal times, but now that people are distracted by anxiety or off their center of balance because of the hard times we're going through, if we act now, we'll get it past them." Would you agree?
I would agree with it in principle, but I can't think of a specific example myself of Canadian policy. Maybe you have some.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'll go to my third. I appreciate that. My third question. Your report also mentions that shortages of affordable housing could be addressed through measures that increase supply. Things like reducing rent controls, relaxing zoning and land regulations. And I'd like to quote my colleague Pierre Poilievre, who said how insane it is that we live in one of the least densely populated nations on planet Earth. There is only 4 Canadians for every square kilometer in this country, and yet we have some of the most expensive real estate. There are more places in Canada where there's no one than there are places where there is anyone. And yet Vancouver is the second. Toronto is the 6th most expensive housing market in the world. And when we compare median income to median housing price, it's more expensive than New York, more expensive than LA, more expensive than London, England, even more expensive than a tiny island nation called Singapore. All of these places are vastly more populated and even less expensive to live in. Why? Is it because while our central bankers print money to spur demand, our local governments block construction and therefore constrain supply? With demand up and supply down, the price rises. So would you agree that the government intervention at all levels and in myriad ways is the source of housing crisis here in Canada?
I wouldn't say it's the source. I think in the sense that the difficulty for monetary policy is that they've wanted to support the economy, and their main lever for doing that is their policy rate. So they lower the policy rate, and interest rates have been low for many years, and this has fueled housing markets throughout the world. To counteract that, what governments have been doing, including the Canadian government, is what they call the macroprudential policy, which tries to place limits on mortgage borrowing so that doesn't drive the house prices up. Then you can also introduce the supply side measures, as I've mentioned. I think one thing to think about with countries that, if you like, statistically have very low population density. I used to work on Australia, and the way I thought Australia had the same sort of housing market issues. And the way Australia has a very urban population, and I think that's probably true of Canada in the sense that a huge percentage of the population live in urban areas, and they're rather like islands, if you like, rather than. You're absolutely right. If you view Canada's population density, it doesn't seem to make sense. But people want to live in cities, and that drives the price up. It might change with more teleworking. We'll see.
Okay, thank you both for that interesting round. We'll turn to Ms. Kotrakis and then over to Gabriel St. Marie. Annie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses this afternoon for your very thoughtful, interesting, and important presentations. Mr. Hemmings, thank you so much for appearing before our committee. Your testimony, I'm sure, is very important to everyone on the committee and to all Canadians who are listening. I'll refer to the economic survey, which was released, the OECD's, which was released March 11th of this year. It notes that the expected fiscal stimulus package, the historic fiscal stimulus package in the US, could boost Canadian exports and the economy as a whole. What areas of the Canadian economy will benefit most from this stimulus? And can you share some thoughts on how Canada can fully take advantage of stimulus spending in the American economy to generate growth here at home?
I have to add, I haven't got a very sort of precise answer on that. Of course, in principle, it looks very much that the US stimulus package will provide a lift to Canada's economy, principally through the exports. I mean, I guess, as we've been talking a little bit about tourism, I mean, one issue there is that it depends to what extent people will be able to move around. That's one factor. The other thing I'm aware of is that, I mean, a lot of the connection between the US stimulus package and the Canadian economy is probably a complicated one, because a lot of the exports from Canada to the US are sort of raw materials or intermediate products. And ultimately, it depends on whether the demand, that extra spending in the US is going on the final products that are wanted for the Canadian inputs go into. So it's those kind of supply chains will influence the effect on the Canadian economy. It's not an easy thing to calculate, to be honest. But I mean, the effect could be reasonably substantial. Quite exactly what you could do about that, I'm not 100% sure, but I suppose the more rapid vaccination is and the more people can move around and spend their money, the better it is, basically. So it comes back to that point about the faster everyone gets vaccinated, the better things are.
And that's a great segue into my next question, because I was going to speak to you about Canada's vaccination efforts, compared to our other international partners. Currently, Canada is third in the G7, behind only the US and the UK, and it ranks third when compared to members of the G20 based on available data. To me, that seems like a reasonable effort. Can you talk about where Canada is placed in vaccination rollout compared to OECD partners, and how the efforts have been increasing?
Well, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, I will say straight off. I mean, I just look at the available data, as I suppose many people do. I mean, it looks as though Canada had a slowish start, but now in terms of the daily vaccination numbers, it's moving up the rankings, so to speak. I suppose, yeah, I mean, clearly it's an improved situation, but I wouldn't really want to comment a huge amount on that, as it's not. I'm not an epidemiologist.
Last question, Annie.
How important, in your view, is the supply of affordable and high-quality childcare to Canada's economic recovery?
It's important. I mean, it seems like this has been a policy issue that has. I mean, Canadian governments have been trying to improve the availability of affordable childcare for many years, and there has been some progress, but it does look like there still there's still work to do, and our report emphasises that. So, I mean, it's great that the problem is recognised, it seems that quite widely, but it just needs more work.
And I think we're lucky, in my own home province of Quebec, I think we have an excellent example of, what a national childcare system could look like. And I know that our Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister follows the works of our committee very carefully. And I'm sure that she would agree with that statement.
We'll have to end it there, and we'll go to Mr. St. Marie, followed by Brian Massey.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I just want to say I have to leave for the House. This is Brian Massey.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank the witnesses and yourself for the courtesy today, and apologize for leaving early. I have to go to the House, and my time could be spent to you, Mr. Chair, whoever. And thank you again.
Thank you, Brian. Good luck in the House. Say the right things, eh? Then we'll go to Mr. St. Marie, followed by Mr. Kelly.
Oui, merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Mr. Hemmings, and I'd also like a reaction from Mr. Letourneau. A couple of days ago, Radio-Canada revealed that Canada recovered 15 times much more money from the Panama Papers than the UK, 12 times much more from Germany. Even Revenue Quebec recovered more money than the CRA that looked after Canada nationwide. So the OECD has a tax avoidance and tax evasion strategy, and apparently Canada seems to be a laggard when it comes to suggested actions vis-a-vis other OECD countries. Mr. Hemmings and then Mr. Letourneau, please. Your thoughts.
I will say straight off that I am not a tax expert, and so I really wouldn't like to speak for my colleagues in our tax department on whether Canada is a laggard. It's a very technical area. If you want to write to me, I can put you in touch with someone, then you can talk to them.
Okay, ben merci. Puis vous,
Okay, and Mr. Letourneau, do you have any comments to make as far as fighting tax havens is concerned? Well, I'm not a tax expert either, but I do know that unfortunately, still nowadays in Canada, this is an easy way out for those who don't want to pay taxes in Canada. They just transfer money to tax havens. And we are part of a coalition that for a number of years has been calling on both the federal government and the provincial governments to take action, especially at a stage of the game where the Canadian government has gone to great lengths to support the economic activity of small businesses and workers that are being affected by the pandemic. So who's going to pay back Canada's debt? Of course, it's through economic recovery, through the tax base. So it's kind of like the question that I was asked earlier about the infamous GAFAs, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple. We need to ensure that Canadian businesses and corporations and those folks that make money in Canada pay taxes in Canada, and that mechanisms are put in place to prevent transferring fortunes to tax havens to escape the tax man in Canada and the provinces. So until we are able to work cooperatively, whether it be within the OECD or other international organizations, and take a common approach, and there'll be billions of dollars that will escape the Canadian tax man and won't be redistributed progressively among communities and the Canadian public. So thank you very much for your question. It's been a number of years that we've been fighting for this. I can't recall the figures exactly, but about 2 or 3 years ago, we heard the figures on this, and it's absolutely ridiculous and mind-boggling just how much money is escaping the taxman in Canada and Quebec. Is there any time left, Mr. Chairman?
Sorry, you're a little over time, Gabriel. We'll now go to Mr. Kelly for 5 minutes and on to Ms. Zerowitz. Pat?
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I don't like to use committee time to debate other members of the committee, but Mr. Fragiskatos made a number of comments in his intervention that were just, quite patently false and demand correction. Members of the opposition, certainly not conservative members of the opposition, at no point opposed the emergency aid measures during this crisis. In fact, quite the opposite. It was, in fact, the conservative opposition that quite quickly understood the insufficiency of some of the support measures, including the wage subsidy as it was initially rolled out. And we spent the early months of the pandemic working constructively to solve many of the problems in delivering these aid measures. So austerity, whether stated or unstated, was never a part of the conservative response to the crisis. What the conservative opposition opposes is further spending, say, up to $100 billion in further undefined stimulus, especially at a time when savings rates of Canadians and many businesses, not all, but many businesses are extremely high. And we expect that there will be economic recovery if we can ever get our people vaccinated. So that needed to be said in response to the incorrect, false characterization made by Mr. Fragiskatos. I think I'm going to
Point
turn
of
to
order,
Mr.
Mr. Chair.
What's your point of order? I don't want to get into a debate here. There's a difference of opinion, certainly. What's your point of order?
I promise it's not a point of debate, Mr. Chair. I would just say that I want it on record that I disagree very respectfully with my colleague, Mr. Kelly.
All right, we'll leave it.
We'll
leave it at that. Mr. Kelly, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. And we've both been at the committee for a long time, so are long enough to know what has actually been said by each member here. The I'll go to Mr. Sullivan. Actually, I'd like to get him into the conversation. How important to your, perhaps you can comment on the importance to your members on having a data-driven plan to safely and permanently reopen the economy.
Well, if you mean by data-driven, if we could have clarity on what the expectations are for fully reopening the economy, fully reopening the borders, what the levels of virus need to be to allow for the economy to reopen more fully. Clearly, our members need that kind of information, and they need it soon. And I'll refer to Ms. Baker. We represent a number of hotels down here, and I will tell you that they are deciding whether to open at this point and deciding whether to hire staff, but are unable to do that at this point because they don't know what the plans are, even though the great majority of the Canadian population will be vaccinated by the end of June, according to the government. So, we look forward to those vaccinations, but it would be very, very important to have clarity on the opening of the borders, the opening of our provincial borders, obviously from our provincial governments, and any other information that can help us plan for the summer and then ultimately for the fall.
Yeah, indeed, we all would like everybody to be vaccinated and get to that point, but we're quite far off of that. With I think we're at 2% right now immunity with 2 doses per person. So as we see and risk losing another summer season. Could you comment maybe on your members? We've heard testimony at this committee about the number of small businesses that are threatened, that the pandemic threatens to wipe out here. We've heard 60,000 small businesses already lost, and that statistic is even getting to be a few weeks old now. Perhaps as many as 180,000 at risk. How many of your members do you think are really in a desperate fight for survival, in the desperate hope that we can have a safe reopening amid an immune population?
Yeah, well, clearly Nova Scotia and much of the Maritimes or Atlantic Canada are in a slightly different position than other areas of the country. But having said that, any business that relies on crowds, that relies on travel, that relies on tourism, are suffering to a significant level. And they expect to continue suffering well into the fall. So, I don't know that I want to put a number on it. I've heard it quoted in Nova Scotia that sort of 85% of the economy is doing okay, but that 15% that represents tourism, travel, and hospitality are simply desperate. We're seeing restaurants close weekly, even in this market where we're able to go to restaurants. And we're seeing, as I mentioned, we're seeing hotels question whether they should open their doors for the coming season.
Okay, we will have to end it there. And I informed Mr. Kelly earlier he'd have to take over as chair about now. Pat, there's 3 rounds left, 5 minutes each. Ms. Zerowitz first, Mr. Barrett next, and Mr. Miss Damoff. Sorry, Pat. Ms. Damoff will have to wrap it up at the end. So I want to personally, before I leave, I got another commitment I can't break. Thank the witnesses for their presentations. I think it was a really interesting change. So Pat, over to you.
All right, and with that, I think I've already forgotten your order here. You've got
Ms. Zerwitz,
Zerwitz, Barrett, and
Damoff.
and then Damoff. And I think that Jansen is going to speak for Barrett. I think, but anyway, I'll let Ms. Zerwitz take it away. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Vice Chair. And I want to thank all the witnesses for their excellent presentations. I'm going to direct my first couple of questions to Mr. Hemmings. Mr. Hemmings, I want to talk to you about employment and jobs. On Friday, Stats Canada reported that employment numbers rose by 303,000 in March in Canada, and we're within 1.5% of our pre-COVID February 2020 jobs levels. How well is Canada doing compared to other OECD countries in terms of jobs recovery?
Well, I think it's doing reasonably well, to be honest. I mean, certainly there are some OECD countries which are extremely reliant on tourism, such as Greece and so on, which are really struggling. And there are some regions within Europe that are having a very, very tough time with these hard-hit sectors, basically. But I think also the uncertainty a little bit is that you do have a certain number of a certain amount of the employment is being supported, for instance, through wage subsidy schemes here in Canada and elsewhere as well. So in a way, the sort of uncertainty is as gradually support is withdrawn and so on, what are you left with? And that's the key thing is aiming for a sort of an appropriate speed of support so that businesses don't go under unnecessarily.
So you would say we're doing fairly well, and I think the supports are there, but they're there because we've learned from the 2008 recession, where you have to support your businesses to be able to have a foundation from which to pivot on. Anyways, thank you for that. My next question to you is about the structural changes that you talked about in terms of the employment, the EI system. And then you also made a comment about guaranteed basic income model. And you talked about how many people worry about it because of the cost, as well as it might discourage people from working. I always worry when people say that, because it feeds into those who are the detractors of guaranteed basic income model. You'd probably find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other people who would probably say the opposite of that as well. So I wanted to ask you, would it be fair to say that the effectiveness of some sort of a guaranteed basic income program really comes down to how the program is actually designed?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure. I think sometimes people talk about slightly different things when they talk about guaranteed income.
Everybody has a different definition, for sure.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, the absolutely pure idea of it is that absolutely everybody gets the same amount of money without any withdrawal of that, depending on income. In practical terms, when this is talked about in Canadian policy circles, you actually talk about a system whereby which this income is withdrawn as you have your own earnings, and that's really a lot more like traditional social welfare. Yeah. It's a means-tested benefit in a sense. So it's and you face the same challenges, which is how do you at what rate do you claw back the benefit? The slower you claw back the benefit, the more expensive it is. The faster you claw it back, the cheaper it is, but you have work incentives.
So it looks like it depends on how you define it, as well as how you actually design the program. Yeah. In any case, I do have to sort of run into one more question. One of the things that Benjamin Tal over at CIBC indicated is that Canadians are sitting on up to about $100 billion of savings. A lot of people are kind of sitting on some money. And as you know, Canada has a goal of reaching net zero by 2050. What are your thoughts on how do we encourage spending in a more sustainable way?
That's a good question. I suppose the very broad answer to that from the, if you like, the economist camp would be just make sure that your taxes, you've got a tax system that reflects the price of carbon. And if you've got that, then in principle, the prices of the goods and services people are incentivized to turn towards greener products. That's not the only answer, but it's a broad tool that does work to an extent.
And would you say that a price on pollution, as what we have, would be one of the key ways that we would be able to encourage more sustainable growth?
It's in principle what you already have. I mean, you have a carbon price system, so in principle, it's already happening.
Okay. Well, so it's
Thank
more
you.
in principle.
You're over time already. Sorry, Ms. Zerowitz.
Okay,
and
thank
with
you so
that,
much.
We'll go to Ms. Jansen.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Mr. Hemmings, in the OECD report, you underscored the need for a transparent plan to ensure the debt burden does not spiral out of control. Currently, Canada has one of the largest debt burdens among the developed nations, according to an article in Bloomberg. As a matter of fact, we would be top of the heap if not for Japan. So would you agree that fiscal anchors should be a keystone principle for stabilizing our debt going forward?
Yes, at some point. I mean, once the economy is on a solid, once recovery is really solidly underway, then policy attention should go back to prioritizing some reduction in public debt. The extent to which active measures may be needed to bring that down will depend on the speed of recovery. I mean, if you have a sufficiently strong economic recovery and tax revenues come back rapidly, it might be that your deficits reach levels where you're going to get reductions in the debt burden without having to make stringent cuts to public spending and so on and so forth. I mean, this is all really going to become more transparent the next year or so, I'd say.
So the fiscal anchor was specifically what I was asking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have a forward-looking plan that says that we aim to contain public debt in this way, and okay. So for instance, we aim to bring the debt to GDP ratio to the net debt to GDP ratio to X in the next 10 years.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to pass it on to my colleague, Mr. Barrett.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. So my question's for Ms. Baker. I think you referenced that 70% of your industry could fail. And I'm just wondering what it is that differentiates the 30% who would survive. Is that just good fortune, or are they part of chains? So what makes them different?
Sure, we have done some analysis and found that some hotels can be at a break even and survive without SIRS or queues with a revenue loss of 20% or less compared to a normal year. So while we do have some data indicating a revenue forecast for 2021, a modest rise over COVID year one, in 2021, this year, hotels will be on average about 45% lower on the top line than a typical normal year. So that means in order to survive, on average, most of our hotels would need queues and SIRS to be extended to the end of 2021. Some, as I mentioned, resort properties will see an increase in domestic travel. Family leisure travel, we are hopeful we'll see some sort of pickup this summer. But really, it's our downtown core hotels and our airport hotels who are dependent on mass gatherings, events, conventions. That is who's really going to need. Those are the hardest hit of the hardest hit, if you will. So we need to have those enhancements and extensions of both the queues and the SIRS program to ensure their survival.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sullivan, I'm wondering if you have seen or if there's been discussions amongst your industry groups on the use of rapid testing to allow businesses to open more fully sooner, and if that's an area where you've been looking for support from government.
Yes, there has been discussion. We are in discussion with the federal government now about receiving some of those rapid tests. It is my understanding that the province of Nova Scotia is about to add to the emergency order, though, that would require public health to approve any businesses who might want to participate in rapid testing. They would have to approve that process. But we're very interested in that, and I know our members are very interested in that, particularly some of the restaurants and some of the large manufacturing facilities.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much time I have left there, Chair. But
about 12 seconds. So I think if it's all right, I'll move on to Ms. Demoff to
thanks very much
to the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly, and you got my name correct. I've been called Mr. Demoff by the chair, and I was originally, before the meeting started, they thought I was part of the Conservative Party, so go figure. Mr. Sullivan, I have a question for you. I was looking on your website and saw that you've done a lot of work at your chamber on diversity and inclusion. Yes. And one of the things that we've noticed during the pandemic is that Indigenous-led business, Black-led businesses have been hit particularly hard. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are as we, move out of the pandemic, how important it is that we put a focus on diversity and inclusion.
Well, I do think to some extent that's already happening. We work closely with a group locally called the Black Business Initiative. I know that they're working on a Black Entrepreneur Fund that's recently been announced. They're working to roll that out, and we'd love to partner with them to at least raise awareness among our broader members. And I know that there have been some supports. I'm afraid I don't know if they were federal supports or provincial supports.
That's okay. I think just more generally, I was fascinated by the efforts that you were making at the chamber to really make sure that was part of your culture within the chamber to really look at diversity and inclusion and recognize how important it was. So it wasn't so much around particular programs, but just in general terms, how important that is.
Extremely important.
And then the other thing I noticed on your website is that you've been doing a lot of work in Halifax on climate change. And again, very impressed with the progressive work that's happening there. And I think sometimes we look at the environment and the economy as being mutually exclusive. And from what I see, what you're doing there, you've recognized that they go hand in hand. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I would have to give a lot of credit to the municipality. So the city of Halifax have developed a plan called Halifact. With a CT at the end, and that focuses on sea rise, which, as you can imagine, is a significant issue, or will be a significant issue for the city of Halifax. So we have, again, partnered with them, tried to raise awareness among our members, and it's clearly something that we need to focus on as a community.
And then when we were talking, you were asked earlier about rapid testing. I'm an Ontario MP, so I can only speak for my province, but Minister Anand, the procurement minister, actually represents the town of Oakville, as do I. And I know she's procured millions of rapid tests, but they're sent through the province. So I would expect for your businesses that there might be, it sounds like there's a bit of disconnect from where the rapid tests are and actually getting them out to your businesses. Is that right?
Well, certainly Nova Scotia has been at the forefront of rapid testing. I would say that. Having said that, we are speaking directly. So the Chamber of Commerce is speaking directly with the federal government about distributing rapid tests. We now will have learned recently that we will have to work more closely with our Department of Public Health. In Ontario, I believe that they've outsourced that a little bit more. The province has said if businesses want to focus on rapid testing or rapid screening through rapid tests, that they could do that sort of on their own. In Nova Scotia, the request has been that funnels through the Public Health Department. We don't quite know what that means, but we're still very keen to provide rapid tests to our members and to businesses.
Well, I have to compliment you. Yeah, I have to compliment you in Nova Scotia because you've really been a model for the world, quite frankly, on dealing with the pandemic. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Demoff, for allowing us to actually finish just about right on time then. So I thank all of our panelists for today's meeting. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting.